Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today we are going to rank all 8 dungeons in Dragonflight. Since we are nearly 2 months into the expansion, I think now is a good time to rate them all. First off, I just want to say that I think it was really smart of Blizzard to only include the 4 Dragonflight dungeons, since the other 4 are brutal as shit. So I'm going to rank all 8 original dungeons and place them where they'll be in my ranking video in all the dungeons of WoW. But first off, my guild has released their very own Valhalla merch. If you want to buy some, I'll leave a link to the page in the description, but more on that at the end of the video. Okay, so starting off with the worst of the worst. The worst dungeon was by a landslide, Dragonflight Hollow. City of the Triumvirate is a terrible dungeon, but Dragonflight Hollow just takes the record for me for being just the worst dungeon ever made for a number of different reasons. Number one, which is the reason I've heard from the most from other people, the amount of trash you have to clear in this dungeon is like almost double the amount in any of the other 7 dungeons. Not only that, but the trash in this dungeon is one of the most ludicrous interrupt requirements yet, which even rivals like the Underrot, since that place has a pretty ludicrous interrupt requirement as well. And if Dragonflight Hollow was a Mythic Plus, it would almost always require a certain comp, since you're pretty much forced to bring someone who can dispel diseases like paladins. Because the dot from the decay speakers does like a shit ton of damage if it goes through, and can easily kill people like even out of combat. And there's also the War Scourge, there's a Mass Fear, so it's pretty tricky to focus interrupts the decay speakers and pay attention to the, I think it's the Hideous Cackle. And having a Tremor Totem from a Shaman or whatever is almost needed just in case things get messy, which they usually do, so just terrible design. And the funny thing is, I'm only halfway through this sort of explanation. The only decent boss was the second one. I love the idea of dropping the traps and then you've got to lead the hounds into them, so you don't really have to deal with them as much. I thought that was really cool. And maybe the last boss too. I think he's okay. But sometimes you do get a bit dicked by having the totem spawn in the mist cloud, so you have less time to kill it. At least for melee you do. The first boss is awful. I think two of those bosses have cleaves, which isn't fun at all to dodge, because the tank could be moving all the time, or you could be moving from other things. And I'll be honest, totems, the totem stuns the healer, so you have to kill it. And then if you're not fast enough, the tank also gets stunned, which means the boss goes around and eats up all the defense. So I was like, who in the right mindset would think this would be a good idea for a boss? And then the tree boss is just a shit show. It's just that it has that annoying mechanic. Well, it's not annoying, but it's one of those many mechanics people don't really understand. We're going to run into a similar problem here with the Halls of Infusion, where the boss does a pull-in, and at least one person has to be in the middle once it finishes. Otherwise, the boss goes berserk. So the problem is a lot of people know that exists, or that's what you have to do, at least on the Mythic mode. Also, he just spawns ads way too frequently, which would make Necrotic a real issue if this was once again a key. However, all this said, actually, right, one more thing. The bridge. Why can you get knocked off the bridge into an endless nest of mobs? Why? But all that said, if this dungeon is not going to be a Mythic Plus, I guess they have an excuse to make this dungeon crazy. And I'll be honest, unlike the City of the Triumvirate, there are still some redeeming things about this place. But it is still a dungeon that I will never, ever, ever look past all this bullshit that has happened in this place. Even if it gets changed, say, half a year down the road. It's just terrible. Anyway, moving on. The second worst dungeon in Dragonflight is Halls of Infusion, which should be renamed to Halls of Cancer, honestly. The first half of the dungeon is actually not bad. It's okay, but there are a lot of things about this dungeon that makes this shitty and not fun to play in. First off, and probably the most obvious, is that Blizzard, for God's sake, add some checkpoints. Because if you die, for example, on the last boss, and no one can res you, which has happened before, you have to run all all the way back, which takes a long time. It takes a long time, and there's no shortcuts you can take. Second, frog boss. Like what I was saying earlier about the tree boss in the previous dungeon. One person needs to stand in the devourer or whatever, or the boss enrages. Again, not a lot of people know that you got to do that. Otherwise, I think that boss in particular is okay. I know that a lot of people don't like the little frogs that you have to fixate, that fixate you and applies poison that kills you at 10 stacks. I think that's fine. I don't mind it. It's just sort of there. Also, right after the second boss, which is on screen now, all those dragon packs on the way to the third boss are so goddamn annoying, because the dragons are so big in their wings, on their on their model. They really restrict you in what you can see, so it's really hard to dodge all the fire patches, similar to Ruby life pools, which we'll get to later. But that's probably because I play melee. I mean, that's just me on just wise. The third boss I have issues with. I mean, come on, Blizzard, fix the fucking cyclone or whatever it is. You could just run. You could run outside of melee range, and it would still hit you. And it doesn't always go in the direction the boss is facing. Most of the time, she'll just cast in a certain direction, and then at the last second, she'll turn and hit like the melee DPS were probably getting out of the way, which is bullshit, and that will definitely kill people in keys, and it won't be their fault either. It's just a shit design. Other than the cyclone, that boss as well isn't too bad. The gauntlet is actually fine. It was pretty terrible at the start. Now that I've done the dungeon a few times, especially on Mythic, since the waves come a lot faster, I think it's fine. And the only problem I have with the last boss is those orbs that spawn pretty much cover the entire melee, so it's almost impossible to hit the boss. And the fact that the orbs move around slightly, which is really annoying as well, because you could get hit by it, you could get clipped by it, whatever. Overall, this is a pretty shitty dungeon, and I would place this above Culling of Strathlon, which I believe is still in the top 10 worst dungeons bracket. So yeah, just a shit dungeon. At this point, I didn't know where to put each dungeon after this, but after Wholesome Refusion, I've got the new Alderman, the new Alderman Legacy of Tyr. Alderman is cool. It is very, very cool. I think this dungeon would be fine if it was added to the Mythic Plus board. It feels kind of similar to the original Alderman in terms of the pathing. The trash, for the most part, isn't that hard. By the way, I love how you can just pop Bloodlust on the first boss and you just clean the fuck out of those bosses. They just melt. It's just so satisfying. The idea that the third boss has going on is quite cool, but it is quite hard not to get stunned by the balls, for example. I think I've got it on screen somewhere. I could be placing an orb somewhere, and then as soon as it drops, the boss immediately does a knockback. And it's also a boss where, yeah, let's see, there it is there. And it's also a boss that the tank needs to know what they're doing, because most of the time they just stand there with the boss, and then he berserks. Otherwise, the fourth boss is okay. The last boss can get a bit hectic with lack of space to stand even. I think that'll be another problem if this was a key dungeon. This dungeon I would place above Utgard Pinnacle. The next one I'm going to say is the Azure Vaults. I don't overly love the Azure Vaults, but I don't overly hate it by any means. I think this is actually a fine dungeon. I really love the Mirror Image boss. I think that's one of my favourites Dragonflight dungeon bosses so far, and the last boss as well, just purely because of his model. He's like some sort of crystal dragon from EverQuest or something. And it sort of reminds you of like Mythic Rathion, where the more you move, the slower you move, I guess. I don't know. Which is not something that you see a whole lot these days. One thing I will say is that that boss could probably be proved as the third boss, maybe make it so the circles spawn slower, because it's almost impossible to place your circle and then not get slowed by them or take a single tick of damage, which does a fair amount of damage on its own, just a single tick of the thing. Or maybe just reduce the amount of times they come in, I don't know. But that's all I really have to say about it. It felt sort of like an indoor Oculus, like Oculus and Nexus together. I think that's what this dungeon sort of felt like, which is okay. The Azure Vault is going to go above the Shadowpan Monastery. The next one I have is the... what is it? Oh yeah, the Ruby Life Pools. The Ruby Life Pools is just a bang average dungeon. Like, it's very quick. I'd say since More Souls, there hasn't been really a 3-boss dungeon that's felt like it's really quick, and I'm not really counting the Grimrail Depot in Shadowlands Season 4. And it is fairly difficult. Like, it's no pushover like More Souls was, generally speaking. I really like the first boss. I think the mechanics are quite cool. Yeah, the tornado is a bit annoying, but it's quite a good boss. Even the second boss is very cool. The last boss I'm not overly fond of because, if you guessed it, just like the trash from Halls of Infusion, the dragon wings are just too goddamn big. So it just requires you to like run around in a circle around a floor covered in lava, but it is manageable because you can't see anything on the ground. But yeah, I don't know, I don't really have much to say about this dungeon either. I actually really like the idea of the dungeon that Razagath and her forces are taking the place for the eggs to turn them into nasty elemental dragons. I'll place this above Halls of Valor. So yeah, I think this is where it gets really tricky because all of these dungeons are really, really good. The next one I've put the Algathar Academy. I know this is everyone's favourite, and honestly I think the top 3 are all tied together because this top 3 was definitely easier to pick over other rankings, but it wasn't easy. Algathar Academy is really cool. I really like how you could just go to any of the 3 bosses and you could go any which way. So some people might go to the elemental, then the bird, then the tree, or probably more logical would be to do the tree, the bird, and the elemental, because the tree boss is significantly more difficult in keys since there's so many ads that spawns. So they'd rather know if the group is going to fall apart at the start of the dungeon rather than like midway through, which I think is completely fair. I don't have a problem with that. The thing I don't get is the birdie boss, how the whole basketball thing is. So the idea is that 3 people grab balls, then they shoot them into the goal. That will trigger one or two things: the meteors and the winds. Triggering the meteors will also stun the boss and make him take extra damage. But it doesn't do anything like that for the winds, other than just being annoying. And you can only use either one of those things once. So I think that boss could have been designed a little bit better. Either make it so you can repeat the shooting mechanics, like you can have the meteors and the winds again. Or maybe just added another goal with another sort of mechanic to make it interesting. I don't know. And the headmaster boss is really funny with all his school-related dialogue. I'll place this dungeon just below the Scarlet Halls. Number 2, I have the No-Kud Offensive. I still don't know how to pronounce it. The No-Kud Offensive. The No-Kud Offensive is probably one of the most unique dungeons Blizzard has ever made. I don't think we've ever had a dungeon that spanned an entire zone before. And it's one where you literally get to fly like the wind, and I absolutely love it every single time. Just like the last dungeon, you get to choose which boss order you want to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you could do the last boss first if you wanted to. But ideally people do the Raging Tempest boss, because he's the most difficult. Oh, he's not so difficult now, since he did have some nerfs on him. The only boss I'm not a huge fan is the Centaur Chieftains. Tara and Maruk. Since it's quite hard to tank them and keep them together. Plus their abilities combos in really annoying ways. And I just love how they implemented the dragon writing into a dungeon like this. It's like almost the perfect dungeon. I'm putting this one above Temple of Sithralis, which means my favourite dungeon in Dragonflight is Neltharis, the ancient stronghold of the Jaren or whatever. I'll be honest, this dungeon absolutely bangs. It's really short, but the bosses are all really cool. All the mechanics are really, really cool. And the last boss is probably my favourite, one of my favourite dungeon bosses of all time. Like, picking up the treasures just instantly reminded me of the Treasure Guardian boss in Desire Lore. And remembering how awesome that boss was just gave me the same vibe. Even the spear boss is really cool. It's unfortunate that no one really knows that you have to trip up the boss 3 times for him to get stunned, or on Mythic, that is. Because it's really painful when he does a full channel of the cast. I think the Mammoth boss is a bit too crazy and overtuned. So I'm hoping that's something they'll fix later. But that's the only bad thing I can say about this dungeon. I would place this dungeon above Mechagon, so it is in the top 20. It's the 20th favourite dungeon for me, at least. So that is all the dungeons ranked. I think that the 4 legacy dungeons are all like fantastic choices. I love how they adapted to Temple of the Jade Serpent, where they just flat out added new mobs, added new mechanics to existing mobs, and especially changing the bosses in certain ways. Like, I didn't even think how annoying Jade Serpent would be if they didn't change Wise Mary at all. But now I actually really enjoy doing that boss, and they made it so there's only one possible boss for the Lorekeeper Stone Step, I believe. And I think the biggest thing that shocked me is the amount of trash that comes out of the shaft down to him. I was like, whoa, what is this? So I hope they change. I hope that they keep doing this with the legacy dungeons, and I hope that they choose different ones in later seasons. But I hope the original ones, the original Dragonflight dungeons, stay the same, because I can't imagine any of the other 4 being keys. That would suck so much. Before we close off the video, I do just want to show you our new merch store, because I think this is this is really, really cool. This has been in the making for the past few months, and our guys in Valhalla, Katagroth, have been working on our own merch to sell to our guildies and anyone else that might be interested. In the description is a link that will take you directly to the front page, where you can see all our different theme designs. They've got them all on screen now. We've got one for all of our 7 different raid teams: the Berserkers, Freya, Ragnar, Ivar, Bjorn, Heimdall, and Drakar. I hope that's how I say it. And then 2 different Valhalla themed designs. So we have tons of cool stuff that I will definitely be buying over the next few weeks, from like Valhalla hoodies, backpacks, clocks, stickers, desk pads, phone cases, and much more. We don't make any profit on purchases, so we make sure we have the lowest prices available for everyone to get. So that is my dungeons ranked. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.